Mugo, the attack took place in Indian-controlled Kashmir earlier this week. 26 people were killed.
Separately, we're seeing tensions flaring up between India and Pakistan. This following on from a deadly attack on civilians in Kashmir.
We will pursue them to the ends of the earth. India's spirit will never be broken by terrorism. Terrorism will not go unpunished.
Recent mutual attacks between India and Pakistan have reignited fears of a clash between the two nuclear-armed neighbours. A group of local tourists visiting Kashmir, which is under Indian control, were attacked by armed assailants, resulting in a massacre. The attack took place in Pahalgam, a picturesque town in the Himalayas often referred to as the Switzerland of India. Omar Abdullah, the region's chief minister, described the attack as the most tragic massacre of civilians in recent years. World leaders condemning the attack included US President Donald Trump, Russian President Vladimir Putin, and EU Secretary-General Ursula von der Leyen. Trump stated on Truth Social that deeply disturbing news was coming out of Kashmir and that the United States stood with India in the face of the massacre. Von der Leyen described the massacre in Kashmir as a despicable attack, while Putin expressed his sincere condolences for the consequences of a ruthless crime. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who cut short his visit to Saudi Arabia following the attack, announced that the perpetrators would be brought to justice. That's when everything started. India and Pakistan took incredible steps regarding border security. Tensions between the two countries reached their peak. Now, we will examine the tensions between India and Pakistan and what happened on the border in detail. But first, please subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, and like our videos to stay updated on our content. Following the Kashmir attack, India closed a border crossing, suspended a water-sharing agreement, and downgraded diplomatic relations with Pakistan, which it holds responsible for the attack. The Indian government has not presented any evidence linking the attack to its neighbour, but has stated that there are cross-border connections with Pakistan. While Pakistan denies the allegations, a previously unknown group calling itself the Kashmir Resistance has claimed responsibility.
We have absolutely no connection with this is some sort of homegrown resistance movement in occupied Kashmir.
The Indian Ministry of Foreign Affairs announced that all visas issued to Pakistani citizens will be cancelled starting Sunday.
Pakistani nationals will not be permitted to travel to India under the SAARC visa exemption scheme visas. Any SVAS visas issued in the past to Pakistani nationals are deemed cancelled.
Additionally, the New Delhi administration advised Indian citizens not to travel to Pakistan and announced other measures, including reducing the number of diplomatic personnel and closing their only functional land border crossing between the two countries. In response, Pakistan announced that it would close its airspace to all Indian-owned and operated airlines and suspend all trade with India, including with third countries. Due to the closure of the airspace, Air India announced that flights to the United Kingdom, North America, Europe, and the Middle East would have to use alternative and longer routes. Similarly, Pakistan announced that all visas under the SAARC visa exemption program, which allowed certain individuals to obtain a special travel document exempting them from visa requirements, have been cancelled. These moves have further escalated tensions between the two countries, following Pakistan's warning that India's suspension of water supplies would be considered an act of war. Protesters took to the streets in both Pakistan and India, demanding that their governments take further action. Pakistani Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif chaired a National Security Committee meeting to respond to India's measures. Shahbaz Sharif warned that any attempt to breach the Indus Water Agreement would be met with a strong response from Pakistan. This groundbreaking agreement had survived two wars between the countries in 1965 and 1971, as well as the major border clash in 1999. The agreement provided a vital water-sharing system for both countries, particularly for Pakistan's agriculture. However, India's decision to cancel the agreement citing the attacks in Kashmir has rendered it ineffective. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has vowed to pursue those responsible for the attacks to the ends of the earth. India has already begun taking action on this matter. On Thursday, Indian police in Kashmir released statements naming 3 suspects they claim were involved in the attack. The statement said that 2 of the 3 suspects were Pakistani nationals. This shocking detail has further escalated tensions between the 2 countries. Pakistan's National Security Committee condemned India's moves, calling them warlike measures. Committee officials stated that Pakistan remains committed to peace and added that it will never allow anyone to violate its sovereignty, security, honour and inalienable rights. Government ministers from both sides hinted that the dispute could escalate into military intervention. Pakistani Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar stated that any kinetic step taken by India would be met with a kinetic response of equal magnitude. Indian Defence Minister Rajnath Singh, in a statement on Wednesday, claimed that they would find not only those who carried out the attack, but also those who planned this despicable act on Indian soil. Underlying all these issues is the Kashmir issue. India and Pakistan each control part of Kashmir, but both claim sovereignty over the entire region. The region has a long, turbulent and complex history. India claims that violence in the region has subsided in recent years, despite decades of bloody insurgency against New Delhi. India alleges that the illegal structure in Kashmir is supported by Pakistan. Pakistan denies this. The Pakistani government said in a statement on Thursday that it supports the people of Kashmir in determining their own future. Diplomatic relations between the 2 countries were already weak before the latest tensions, which followed India's revocation of Kashmir's semi-autonomous status in 2019 and Pakistan's expulsion of India's ambassador. Although this situation has deepened tensions in the region, the situation had largely stabilised after the 2 countries renewed their ceasefire agreement in 2021. However, following the attacks on Kashmir, relations between Pakistan and India are now perhaps at their most tense in the last century. Since the uprising began in 1989, tens of thousands of people have lost their lives in Kashmir, but violence has decreased in recent years and tourism has returned to this beautiful region. Until the latest incident, tourists were not usually targeted in such attacks. So what will happen now? What if a nuclear standoff develops between the 2 countries? What kind of nuclear capabilities do India and Pakistan have in the event of such an unwanted clash? Let's first look at India from a nuclear perspective. India's new coalition government, led by the Hindu nationalist Bharatiya Janata Party, has promised to reconsider the country's nuclear option if it wins the confidence vote on March 28th. Since 1974, when India tested what it called a peaceful nuclear device, it has had the technical capability to build nuclear bombs. While others, including neighbouring China, have built up their nuclear arsenals, India has officially remained committed to its nuclear policy. These days, Russia and the US are reducing their stockpiles. The United Kingdom and France are also reducing their much smaller nuclear forces. All 5 nuclear powers, including China, have halted weapons testing and signed a test ban agreement that severely limits their ability to produce new weapons. So it was possible to ask why India chose this moment to acquire nuclear weapons before the Kashmir attacks. There is certainly no law against it. Unlike Iraq or North Korea, which signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, and then were caught secretly trying to build bombs, India is one of the few countries that has not signed either the NPT or the test ban agreement, and it argues that the 5 nuclear powers must first agree to disarm. Previous governments came close to the nuclear threshold, but backed down out of fear of the high price India would have to pay to break the nuclear taboo. However, by refusing to completely rule out this option, they rightly pointed to the dangers of its neighbours. China, already a nuclear power, and Pakistan, which is just a mile away and has its own nuclear weapons, are neighbouring countries. Now, following the Kashmir attack, India finds itself in a much more dangerous position. India continues to modernise its nuclear arsenal, and at least 4 new weapon systems and several new delivery platforms are being developed to complete or replace existing nuclear-capable aircraft, land-based delivery systems, and sea-based systems. Several of these systems are nearing completion and will be deployed soon. We estimate that India may have produced enough military-grade plutonium for 130 to 210 nuclear warheads, but likely only produced around 172. Gathering and analysing accurate information about India's nuclear forces is a more challenging endeavour than for many other nuclear-armed states. India has never disclosed the size of its nuclear stockpile, and Indian officials do not regularly comment on the capabilities of the country's nuclear arsenal. Although some official information can be obtained from parliamentary inquiries, budget documents, government statements, and other sources, India generally maintains a relatively opaque culture regarding its nuclear arsenal. India has previously refused to disclose the costs of specific nuclear weapons programs, and, in 2016, the Indian government added the Strategic Forces Command to the list of security organisations exempt from India's Right to Information Act, thereby preventing journalists, researchers and the public from accessing critical information about India's nuclear arsenal. Additionally, unlike geopolitical rivals such as China or Russia, the United States generally does not publish assessments of India's nuclear arsenal. Therefore, the information we present on India's nuclear capabilities is derived from a combination of analyses and estimates found in the Nuclear Notebook. On the other hand, while the Indian government rarely makes official statements about its nuclear arsenal, the Ministry of Defence's Defence Research and Development Organisation frequently publishes useful information about the weapon systems it is developing. This information can be found in monographs, monthly reports, and other publications. While these reports rarely contain specific details about India's nuclear program, they sometimes provide data points on dual-use delivery systems that can be used for analysis. Assessments of India's nuclear power have also increased following the Kashmir attack. One of the most notable aspects in this regard is uranium. India is one of a handful of countries believed to produce both highly enriched uranium and weapons-grade plutonium. However, it is assumed that uranium production is primarily focused on fuel production for an increasing number of nuclear-powered ships and submarines. India's source of weapons-grade plutonium has been the operational Dhruva plutonium production reactor at the Bhabha Atomic Research Centre complex near Mumbai, and the Cyrus reactor at the same location until 2010. If tensions between Pakistan and India escalate due to the Kashmir issue, this reactor could play a critical role. In March 2024, after more than a decade of delays, India also completed the construction of its first unprotected 500-megawatt prototype fast breeder reactor at the Indira Gandhi Atomic Research Centre near Kalpakkam and began loading the core. The new reactor produces more plutonium-239 than it consumes during the fission process, and therefore, if operated effectively, it could significantly increase India's future plutonium production. Additionally, it has been stated that 6 more fast breeder reactors will be commissioned over the next 15 years. The International Panel on Fissile Materials estimated that India had produced approximately 680 kilograms of weapons-grade plutonium as of early 2023, assuming approximately 4 kilograms of plutonium per warhead. This would theoretically be sufficient to produce 130 to 210 nuclear warheads. However, there are some caveats associated with this calculation due to various uncertainties. Most importantly, it is unclear whether India prioritizes the development and production of higher-yield thermonuclear weapons, lower-yield fission-only weapons, enhanced single-stage weapons, or any combination of these designs. All of these could use different amounts of plutonium enriched to different levels. India's 1998 nuclear tests reliably validated a fission design, but the country's progress on enhanced fission and thermonuclear weapon designs remains highly uncertain. Additionally, it is likely that India has not used all of its plutonium to produce warheads and has retained some in reserve. The size of India's nuclear stockpile also depends on the number and type of launchers capable of delivering them. as it is unlikely that most nuclear-armed states produce significantly more warheads than they can actually launch. On the other hand, let us turn to Pakistan's nuclear power, which is alleged to be linked to the Kashmir issue and the brutal attacks that have taken place there. Pakistan continues to gradually expand its nuclear arsenal with more warheads, more delivery systems, and a growing fissile material production industry. Analysis of commercial satellite images of construction at Pakistani army garrisons and air force bases shows what appear to be newer launchers and facilities that could be related to Pakistan's nuclear capabilities. We estimate that Pakistan currently has a stockpile of approximately 170 warheads. The US Defense Intelligence Agency predicted in 1999 that Pakistan would have between 60 and 80 warheads by 2020. However, several new weapon systems have been deployed and developed since then, leading us to a higher estimate. Our estimate contains significant uncertainty because neither Pakistan nor other countries publish much information about Pakistan's nuclear arsenal. Several new delivery systems under development, 4 plutonium production reactors, and an expanding uranium enrichment infrastructure give Pakistan the potential to increase its stockpile in the coming years. The scale of this projected increase will depend on various factors, including the number of nuclear-capable launchers Pakistan plans to deploy, how its nuclear strategy evolves, and how much India's nuclear arsenal grows. As of 2025, there is suspicion that Pakistan has over 200 nuclear capabilities, operating under a broader doctrine of credible minimum deterrence aimed at emphasizing a defensive and limited nuclear posture. Pakistan acts under a nuclear doctrine it calls full-spectrum deterrence. This posture is primarily aimed at deterring India, which Pakistan defines as its primary enemy. The belief that Pakistan's nuclear weapons have deterred India since the mid-1980s has solidified the value of nuclear weapons in the country's security calculations. In May 2023, retired Lieutenant General Khalid Kidwai, an advisor to Pakistan's National Command Authority, which oversees the development, doctrine and deployment of nuclear weapons, delivered a speech at the Islamabad Institute for Strategic Studies, where he explained what full-spectrum deterrence means. According to Khalid Kidwai, this doctrine entails Pakistan possessing full-spectrum nuclear weapons in 3 categories: strategic, operational, and tactical, and ensuring that these weapons fully cover the vast Indian landmass and surrounding territories, leaving no safe haven for India's strategic weapons. Under this doctrine, Pakistan must possess a comprehensive arsenal of weapons in kilotons and ensure that these numbers are strictly guaranteed to deter the enemy's declared policy of mass retaliation, meaning that even if Pakistan's mass counter-retaliation is not harsher, it can still be equally violent. Additionally, this doctrine allows Pakistan to maintain the freedom to select from a full range of targets in India, including high-value targets, counterforce targets, and battlefield targets, excluding India's indigenous BMD or Russian S-400 systems. Kidwai and other former Pakistani officials argue that this stance and Pakistan's special emphasis on non-strategic nuclear weapons were specifically designed as a response to India's perceived cold start doctrine. In short, when we look at the nuclear weapons capabilities of both Pakistan and India, it is not far-fetched to say that both sides are capable of creating very serious and disturbing situations in the region. This possibility is increasing over time, especially after the brutal attacks in Kashmir. While both countries are taking measures such as closing their airspace to each other and cancelling visas, nuclear weapons remain an undesirable disaster scenario. Although it seems unlikely that this tension will ease in the future, world leaders are in favour of ending the crisis between India and Pakistan as soon as possible. We will see more clearly what the situation will ultimately bring in the future. Thank you for watching.